So the Las Vegas Raiders have a massive game coming up here against the Los Angeles Rams. This is in LA, so essentially a home game for the Las Vegas Raiders. Probably the only game that's really a home game for the Raiders because I am confident that we're going to get a lot of fans at this game. But we're going to talk about this game because I know a lot of people are ready to tank. I know a lot of people hope the Raiders lose every game from this point forward, but that is not me. In fact, I hope the Raiders win every single game going forward, and I hope we're able to make the playoffs this year. I know that's probably wishful thinking at this point, but regardless of that, I hope something clicks at whatever point, and I hope the Raiders make the playoffs because over the past 5 years, the 2 years that we had a lot of success in both 2021 and even most recently last year, we're basically out of it in both seasons, right? Like at the midway point, everyone was like, "Hey, this team sucks," right? This season's over. And in 2021, we ended up making the playoffs, right? We went on a run. We won multiple games. We ended up making the playoffs. And then even last year, we're literally one game out of the playoffs. That too, we had technically won that game against the Indianapolis Colts. Remember, Jack Jones jumped it and he forced the kicker to ultimately pull the football left. It was a incomplete kick essentially, or it was a missed field goal, I should say. And the Raiders had won that game, and then for some reason, even though Jack Jones was never offsides, right? We watched the replay; he was never offsides. They penalized him for having such a great jump, and they got a retry, and they ended up making the field goal, and we ended up losing that game. But the Raiders should have made the playoffs last year as well. But my point is in any given season, you can go on a 4, 5, 6 game win streak. You can have success, and even if we don't make the playoffs, I know from a draft position, it would make the Raiders have a worse draft pick. But I think winning games does do a lot for teams, right? It makes you better as a team. It makes you more comfortable. It shows the younger guys how to actually win. So although I know some people will disagree with it, I hope the Raiders do go in and beat the Rams. But they will be without one of their key offensive linemen. In fact, some people think Dylan Parham is the Las Vegas Raiders' best offensive lineman at the moment. Antonio Pierce has went out and said that guard Dylan Parham will be out this Sunday, but he is confident that Jordan Meredith will be ready to step up in his place. Jordan Meredith this past week ended up taking over for Dylan Parham, Parham's missed a ton of time this season. He missed time, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks ago as well. And at that point, Cody Whitehair ended up coming in at left guard, and then Paris Johnson went over to right guard. But this week, they're going to actually go with a different approach. They're going to leave Paris Johnson at left guard. They're going to actually just put in Jordan Meredith at right guard. And I think that's the right way forward. I don't think Cody Whitehair's that good. I actually think Meredith's a lot better. And he was pretty solid last week, right? Watching this tape, he played like 40-plus snaps. He was pretty solid, right? He had some snaps that were, was moving people, right? He was able to do some good things. And I think as we kind of go forward, even though Dylan Parham won't play for the Raiders, this will help Jordan Meredith continue to develop. I truly think the Raiders would be a better offensive line with Dylan Parham at center and Jordan Meredith starting at guard, or even Paris Johnson going to center and Meredith starting at the other guard position. Obviously, Paris Johnson probably won't play center this year, especially since he's a rookie, right? Centers take some time to develop from college to the NFL. Although I do think, Paris Johnson can play center. I think he's a different type of player. I think he's like one of the highest graded prospects I had ever seen coming out. Him and Creed Humphrey were like neck and neck coming out. We predicted when Creed Humphrey was coming out, this guy's going to be one of the best centers in the NFL. And Paris Johnson was kind of in that same boat as a prospect. Obviously, the Raiders moved him to guard. But with that being stated, we will end up getting Jordan Meredith, who's going to start for the Raiders against the Rams. And not having Dylan Parham does suck for the Raiders because I did really want to see Dylan Parham put together a good season this season specifically, but he's kind of been banged up this entire year. Right? He's missed so many snaps over the course of the season. He hasn't been healthy. And it's unfortunate because this could be Dylan Parham's last chance to start with the Raiders. And we might end up moving off of Dylan Parham at the end of this season. Right? There's a real chance we end up releasing him. If not releasing him, maybe we trade him. Or he ends up just getting his position overtaken. But maybe you go out and sign a guard that's a free agent. Maybe you go out and draft a guard that's coming out of the NFL draft. And it's unfortunate, but hopefully he does end up getting healthy, but he will not play against the Los Angeles Rams. He has a foot injury, obviously. We'll see what ends up happening as we kind of go forward. Another guy that to me, this absolutely sucks, is going to be wide receiver Jakobi Meyers. So Jakobi Meyers did practice a little bit this year, or this week, I should say. But Adam Schefter's putting it out there that he's doubtful for Sunday. Although he is technically a game-time decision, he's likely not going to play, right? And I think for the Raiders, this sucks as well because when you think about a guy like Jakobi Meyers potentially being out there, it impacts, how much success we'll be able to have. Because last week, one of the things I noticed, and I'm not going to 100% put the blame on Aiden O'Connell. I think me personally, I want to kind of tone that down a little bit because I understand the limitations that both Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew are going through at the moment. Right, we have a huge limitation, which is our offensive coordinator. Right, he's a really, really bad offensive coordinator. But having a guy like Jakobi Meyers makes it a lot easier because last week I noticed that not only did we not push the ball to our wide receivers, but like Aiden O'Connell was taking all these checkdowns, and you're not going to win football games not pushing the ball downfield. In fact, minus our first drive, and I think there was one other drive where we had success like in the third quarter, we did not push the ball downfield. Our quarterback was not comfortable with some of the reads downfield. And a part of that is the guys that are out there. Aiden O'Connell is going to be a lot more comfortable throwing the ball to Jakobi Meyers than he is to a guy like Christian Wilkerson or a guy like DJ Turner, or one of these other guys that may be out there, Alex Bachman or whoever else is kind of out there. Jakobi Meyers actually really benefits the Raiders. Now, before we go forward, I want to take a second to give a big shout out to the sponsor of this channel, Underdog Fantasy. Plus, I want to share with you guys my picks for this week. Also, I want to look at last week's picks because they ended up hitting. Last week, we had 4 picks for $215. The 3 picks we had ended up hitting. The 4th guy we had, Jakobi Meyers, ended up actually not playing last week. As you guys know, he was out of last week's game. Unfortunately, he'll probably be out again this upcoming week. But I am confident that if Jakobi Meyers was healthy last week, he would have hit the 7.65 fantasy points, right? I think he would have hit that last week. But the cool thing with Underdog is if you have a player that's out, you don't automatically just end up losing. They just adjust it, and instead of 215, it ended up being a payout of $129. So we still ended up winning last week. And I want to share with you guys the picks for this upcoming week. This week we are going to take some picks that I think are definitely going to hit. Now, some of this involves some trades, right? So I think that's going to be kind of interesting to see if it actually ends up working out the way I think it'll end up working out. So we got the Green Bay Packers taking on the Houston Texans. Now, this is in Green Bay. I checked the weather. The weather's clear, so I think it's a great sign as of right now for these picks to ultimately hit. But we got 2 of the best young quarterbacks about to go, head to head with one another. We got Jordan Love and CJ Stroud. I think both quarterbacks are great quarterbacks. Both offensive play callers also are familiar with each other. If you guys don't know this, Matt LaFleur and Bobby Slowick, the offense coordinator of the Texans, coached together for a number of years. They're part of that Kyle Shanahan tree. Both guys are. And both guys are great play callers. And I think it's one of those games where we're going to see a high-scoring game. Essentially, 247 yards passing for Love, 257 for CJ Stroud. We're going to take the higher on both of those. I think both of those are going to end up hitting. And then we're going to take the Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers higher on both. I know some Raider fans are going to say, hey, man, I don't know if this is going to end up hitting. But that, too, it's a Sunday night game. It's in Pittsburgh, right? So it's going to be one of those games where it's going to be... it's going to be loud. It's going to be rowdy. But Aaron Rodgers has a lot to prove, right? Some people think that this guy's past his prime. I kind of agree with that, too. I think he might just be over. His career might just be over at this point. But 222 yards is really not that many passing yards. That, too, the Steelers are making a change at the quarterback position. So I think we're going to see a little bit more of scoring, right? Russell Wilson's going to come in. I think Wilson's going to be able to score some touchdowns. Where Justin Fields doesn't really do a good job playing in structure. I think there's a good chance Devontae Adams is going to be able to get at least 48.5 yards. The hamstring's apparently healthy now, right? Apparently that was a real thing. And I think he's going to want to come out here and really prove himself, right? Really prove that he's still a good wide receiver. To me, this one's definitely going to hit. I think that's super, super simple, super easy. Aaron Rodgers, this one's questionable. It might not because of the fact that Aaron Rodgers is kind of struggling, but he had 294 yards last week. He had 244 the week before. 225 against the Broncos. That too, these are 3 pretty good defensive schemes as well. So going up against the Steelers, he's already had more than 222 in every single of the last 3 weeks. I'd be surprised if he does not have more than that, so we'll take the higher there. Lastly, Amari Cooper is going to make his debut with the Buffalo Bills, 35 yards. I don't see how he would not be able to pass that. You go from Deshaun Watson, arguably one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, to one of the best. I know they might not be on the same page. Amari Cooper might not even play full-time snaps, but if you run 10 passing concepts, and you tell Cooper to do X, Y, and Z on every single one of these plays, I'd be surprised that he's not going to see at least 4 or 5 targets, right? And Cooper still has it in his game. He's still a great wide receiver, great route runner. Now he gets a quarterback that can deliver him the football. I think this one hits. Let's go ahead and lock it in. If you guys want to make your own picks, go to underdogfantasy.com, use the code Raiders, or there's a link down in the comments below. Click that link, make your own picks. Tag me on Twitter with your picks, a screenshot of your picks, and we'll talk about it on Twitter. Let's get right back into this video. Jakobi Meyers actually really benefits the Raiders. And Jakobi Meyers might not be a true number 1 wide receiver, or maybe he is, right? I think he really hasn't had that chance to prove it. But unfortunately, he's not going to play against the Rams. I think this does suck for the Raiders. One of the things we got to note with the Rams, very similar to the Steelers, the Rams have a good defensive line. Although the Steelers are better, right, if they're fully healthy, I think the Steelers defensive line we saw last week is probably just as good as the Rams defensive line. Obviously, the Steelers have a great pass rusher in TJ Watt, but the Rams have an equally great pass rusher. Now, this guy's a rookie, so people aren't going to give him the credit he deserves. But Jared Verse came out of Florida State, phenomenal football player, man. Arguably, he's the best, right now, the best rookie defensive player that had came out from last year's draft. Right, Jared Verse is absolutely incredible, especially when it comes to pass rushing. This guy's had a lot of success, even against some really, really good tackles. So the Raiders will be going up against Jared Verse now. Colton Miller did have a really good game last week, so I would expect Colton Miller to continue to improve that play and potentially shut down a guy like Verse. But don't sleep on this kid, man. The guy's a very good football player. They also have a couple of younger defensive linemen. So Byron Young's another guy that had success last year. He's a rookie. It's not the same Byron Young that the Raiders drafted, obviously. This guy's the outside linebacker that played for Tennessee. He's pretty good, right? He had like 8-9 sacks last year, so as a rookie, he was pretty good. He's in year 2, but the guy that I think is probably the best defensive lineman these guys have right now is going to be Kobe Turner. Kobe Turner last year had like 11 sacks as a rookie. Some people think he's like, if not just as good as Jalen Carter, he might be better. I don't personally agree with that. I think Kobe Turner really just has a good rip move, but this is his second year, right? So he is developing a little bit. He is getting better. But the Rams have a good defense line. Don't sleep on that unit, right? And we also know with Aiden O'Connell, the guy doesn't run around. The guy's not going to get out of the pocket as much as some of our other quarterbacks. In fact, I actually saw this stat here by JP Football, which was kind of crazy to me that this is a fact, but it's not shocking at all, to be honest. JP said that a random but wild stat is that Raiders quarterback Aiden O'Connell has not attempted a single quarterback scramble in his entire 442 snaps he's played since entering the NFL. This is via Next Gen Stats. He said he's the only quarterback to ever achieve this feat in the entire Next Gen era. So I don't know exactly how long the Next Gen era has been. I'd make the assumption it's been around for at least 5 years. But that is kind of crazy to think that there's been no other quarterback in the history of the quarterback play to not have attempted a single quarterback scramble, essentially. Just on the top of my head, I can't really think of a time that Aiden O'Connell ran with the football, specifically in a scramble, right? Not a quarterback sneak, but like an actual scramble. He tried running with the football. And I know he's had some plays over the past couple of weeks where he's gotten out the pocket, right? He's done a much better job, in my opinion, getting out the pocket. But scrambling, it's another element to kind of add. And it is kind of interesting however you look at it, right? And just kind of factoring in the fact that the Rams have a good defensive line. They're going to be able to get after the quarterback. And the Raiders also have Dylan Parham Out. It's going to make us a little bit weaker. But we'll see what ends up happening, right? I think the Raiders should still be able to handle that defensive line. But just don't overlook that defensive line. It's a good unit. Of course, I think for the Raiders, one of the things they should be able to do is have success running the football against this unit. The Los Angeles Rams have really good pass rushers in Jared Verse. They have a good pass rusher in Byron Young, at least young pass rushers. But those guys aren't true run defenders, right? They're guys that are going to get after the quarterback. They're uphill type of guys. They do have Kobe Turner, but, I think Turner still being young, you can potentially run the ball on a guy like him. They have another D tackle who's a rookie who also starts. And they do have a rookie in Brandon Fisk. Although I will say Fiskey's not great, we should be able to run the football. And I think for the Raiders, that's the one thing you're going to have to do. You're going to have to run the football on this defense, on this front. To me, the Los Angeles Rams, although they're a good football team, they're well coached, right? And they can always score 40 points on any given day. I do think this is the worst Rams team since the Sean McVay era. I think McVay's a great coach, but he has an aging quarterback who's kind of struggled a little bit this year, Matthew Stafford. The defense is young, right? They've drafted really well, but this unit is still like 1 or 2 years away, right? Because they have a lot of young guys. On the offensive line, they have probably two guys that are young that'll end up starting. I think there's a chance that either Dylan McMahon or Justin Ditch or Ditch, I don't know how to say his name, but he's also another guy that was a UDFA that the Rams ultimately picked up. Might end up starting at the guard position for these guys. So these guys might have a starting guard and center that are rookies, right? So the Raiders have to be able to take advantage of those type of guys, right? So we'll see what ends up happening, right? Again, I think this is a winnable game for the Las Vegas Raiders. Also note, the Rams are dealing with some injuries, right? So Logan Bruss, although he is expected to play, right? He did fully practice. He does have a knee injury, right? So that's their starting left guard. So although coming into this game, they might actually get their starting left guard, we've seen with Dylan Parham. Last week, he played like 10 snaps until he recognized that, hey, my foot's just not healthy enough to continue to be out here and take a pounding on that foot. Essentially, he came out last week, so that could happen with this guy as well, right? They have another wide receiver in Jordan Whittington who did not play last week. He has a shoulder injury. He's a rookie out of Texas. He's pretty good. I think he has a ton of upside. Joe Noteboom has limitedly practiced for this team. Another guy that's kind of banged up. I'm not sure if he's going to end up starting for them. I think he played a little bit of guard as well in the past for them. I think he's played tackle as well. I actually like Noteboom. I think he came out of TCU back in 2021. It's nice to know that he's still in the NFL. And then you got Cooper Kupp, who is going to be a game time decision. Obviously, he'll be one of the big ones to see if he plays or not. But, generally speaking, the Raiders should be able to have success against the Los Angeles Rams. There's no reason why the Raiders cannot beat this team. And again, I know some people are not going to want to win. Some people are going to say just lose the rest of these games. I disagree so much with that. To me, drafting players, depending on where it doesn't really matter. The best quarterback in the NFL can be the last pick in the NFL draft. He can be a 6th, 7th round quarterback. He can be the 10th overall pick. It just comes down to being able to have a good roster and having a good coach to really allow a quarterback to have success, right? And I think the worst thing you can do is tank and then just not have success, right? And then, of course, we'll just need our guys to continue to step up on the defensive side. Divine Diablo looked really good last week. I know the Raiders still ended up losing. I think the big reason we lost last week was because the offensive side of the football just couldn't score points. But Diablo looked really good last week, as did Adam Butler. We had a couple other defense guys step up a little bit. Matthew Butler played a little bit, although he did have a key penalty, which I didn't necessarily agree with, but he had some nice snaps as well. We saw guys like Corin Bennett continue to have a great season for the Raiders, and I want to see him continue to do his thing, right? So I want to see the Raiders' younger players just continue to battle it out, continue to get better, continue to improve, and I want the Raiders to put together a couple of wins. If the Raiders are able to win a couple of games, and we got the Rams, we got the Chiefs, we got the Bengals. I know people are going to say those are 3 hard games. I disagree. They're all winnable games for the Raiders, right? If the offense does this thing, those are winnable games for the Raiders. Now, remember, the Chiefs will be fired up next week to play the Raiders. We had that Trey Taylor thing kind of happen weeks ago, which will probably get resurfaced next week. The Bengals have been good in the past. They have a good quarterback, but they've been inconsistent as well. And even the Rams are beatable, right? These are beatable teams. These teams are not what they were last week. And I know the Chiefs are a little bit different because they're undefeated, but something tells me they're not as good as what their record indicates, right? The Chiefs haven't blown any teams out. There's been close games in every single one of those games, and they've been able to just win, right? And that's what the Chiefs always have kind of done. But again, I think if the Raiders can win a couple of games, it could get our season back on track. Right, so we'll see what ends up happening. I want to know what you guys think. Let me know down in the comments below if you guys think the Raiders should continue to win. If you guys think we can win, drop a comment down below. And I will see you guys next time with another video.